Hey, I'm just going to shoot this real short video explaining how I got my little portable propane heater to operate on a thermostat. Right here you'll find this is a 12 volt normally closed solenoid valve. It's rated for fuel, air, and water. You can acquire these on eBay. They're pretty easy to install. I've anchored them with some zip ties to the bottom of the stove itself and installed on each side. This is a Street 90 brass 1/4-inch pipe thread. An adapter is screwed into that takes it to 3/16 barbed fittings. So 1/4-inch pipe thread Street 90 and an adapter from pipe threads to barbed fitting. And then the hoses run off of this. And this ties in over here on the right. As you can see, this is the fuel line going into the main burn chamber. I simply use tubing cutters to cut that line. It's about 5 millimeters, so a 3/16 flexible fuel line you can pick up at an auto parts store will fit snugly on there, and I went ahead and installed a hose clamp. Up here you'll see this is where it comes from the regulator. That is the same fuel line that runs down through the burner that used to run at a diagonal angle, more like this, and I've cut out those sections and installed the flexible line. It's both the same fittings on both sides, and it does have a flow direction, so you want to make sure that you install it with the correct flow direction running to the burner. The hose clamps are on it, it's tight and secure. And behind you'll see that's the oxygen depletion sensor. Anytime your oxygen level gets too low for combustion, starts producing carbon monoxide, it will shut off the main fuel line as well as the pilot. The pilot light heats up the thermocouple, which travels through this wire right here. You see this wire the screwdriver is pointing to? Right there. That wire sends the millivolt signal up to the regulator that keeps the valve open. If you lose your pilot light, that's going to shut that valve off and shut off all gas through the pilot tube, which is located right here, and the main fuel line that I've cut into to install my 12 volt solenoid valve. Now, once this is installed and all the plumbing and the different fittings have been installed, now you have to wire it up. You got 2 wires coming off of it, so polarity doesn't matter. Once it's energized, it'll open. That'll allow gas to flow. Now, this doesn't disrupt the pilot light. The pilot light will stay on continuously unless one of its safeguards shut it off. So, once you hook up this to a 12 volt power supply, it'll energize this solenoid, and that energizing of the solenoid will cause it to open and allow the gas to flow. Now, how do you control it with a thermostat? If it's hooked up directly to a 12 volt power supply, then you're going to have the solenoid on all the time, and it's not going to cycle the way it should. So the wires coming out of here, as you'll see, I've got 2 wires that are purple, 2 wires that are black, and 1 set of speaker wires. Now, one of the wires gets hooked up directly. Now, I hooked it up to the positive line. It doesn't really matter, you can do it either way. The black line to the purple line, that's one straight connection with a wire nut. And then the silver and the copper colored line, that gets hooked up directly to the thermostat. One goes to the purple, and the other one is connected so it completes that circuit, also to the purple. Okay, I'm going to correct that last statement. The last statement indicated that what you have here is the one line coming from your power source, the 12 volt, hooked up to the purple wire, and then the other line from the power source hooked up to one of the speaker wires, and then from the solenoid to the other speaker wire. And that turns the actual thermostat into your switch that energizes and de-energizes the solenoid valve. Now over here I've got, this is the internals for a Honeywell, as you can see, a Honeywell thermostat. Pretty basic, pretty simple, heat, cool. Well, you had to do some wire testing, but with this particular model, I found out that that first and third pin is what connects or completes the circuits from the inside right here. You'll see that the first and third from the right, if you flip it over, it does require 2 AAA batteries to operate this. But if once you plug that in, I'll just plug that in here real quick. Pardon the camera shaking around. Once you plug that in, that completes the circuit whenever there's a call for heat. I'll just pause for a moment to get that back together. Okay, alright, now I'm back. As you can see, the thermostat, down here on the bottom, you see it's got a switch. Heat, off, and cool. Now when you're not in the vehicle, and you're not trying to get heat, like I am when I'm in my vehicle, or it could be your cabin, it could be your ice fishing shanty, it doesn't really matter. When you don't want heat, you want to switch that to off. That's going to make sure that it doesn't energize the solenoid. Now there are safeguards in place. If the pilot's lit, it doesn't matter if the solenoid if the pilot light is not lit, it won't matter if the solenoid's open, because you still won't get gas flow, because the regulator up here won't allow any gas to flow down to the solenoid valve. So what I do with this is I can adjust the temperature, take that up, hold the button in, take it to say 60. Whatever you want to take it to is fine. Now you hear that click. That was the solenoid valve and the energizing and opening up that flow of gas. So it'll cycle off and on. And you can see on the display there it says heat on. That tells you that it's functioning. Now if I turn it down, take it down below 46, set it to 40, you'll see that switch to heat off. Or the bead just disappear entirely. There was this real subtle click with the solenoid valve. That was opening and closing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and pause the filming for a moment, turn this around, energize and fire it up, and let you see it in action as it's working, cycling off and on. Now as you can see, the pilot light is on, and I've got the thermostat hooked up to it, but it's set at a temperature where it's not going to call for heat. Once I turn that on above the set point of 40, above 47 degrees, the current temperature, it'll cycle on and it'll start burning. Now, the knob over here, I've got it set to the low position. You can set it to the high position. They do recommend you do that when you first start it to get it heated up. But you can operate it on high or low. I generally operate it on low. But you got to leave it in that low position, even though the solenoid valve is controlling the operation of the heater. So now I will raise the set point temperature of the thermostat to something above our current temperature, 70. There it is. It says heat on, and the unit just fired up. There was a slight click. You probably didn't hear it. It is set to high, so under the right conditions you're going to start to see that start to glow red. You can definitely feel the heat coming off of it. And it's going to cycle off and on based on whether or not there's a call for heat. Now, I use this when I travel for work so I can stealth camp in my van and not have freezing temperatures all night long. Now obviously you have to not be stupid. I've got an onboard smoke detector, a carbon monoxide detector, and a fire extinguisher. Also with the sleeping bag on my cot, I don't want it falling over into the stove. I hang the stove on those 2 screws so it faces forward. But you don't want that falling over onto the stove and catching on fire. So I use little twist lock tarp clamps. They're available at Harbor Freight to tether the sleeping bag to the driver's side of the vehicle away from the stove. And I've used this for several nights, never had any issues. It cycles off and on. And the sleeping bag that I use is quite warm, so I generally set it to about 50 degrees, which is the halfway point for the sleeping bag rating, and I'm comfortable all night long. You do need to exercise a little common sense. You know, there is an oxygen depletion danger, so take your front windows and leave them down about a half an inch. With the rain protectors that I have on the sides, the wind deflectors, that'll actually prevent any rain from getting in, should it be raining, but it does provide combustion air and the important breathing air. So again, you know, don't let Darwin dictate whether or not you live or die. Exercise a little common sense. And again, I wouldn't do this without having a smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, fire extinguisher. You got to have several redundant systems in place. If the pilot light were to go out, that would de-energize the main regulator that comes with it manufactured. If you lose your 12-volt power supply, it comes unplugged or the battery drops too low. that will de-energize the solenoid valve and close the gas supply to the primary heater. It doesn't mean you lose the pilot light, but the pilot light is hardly a risk as far as oxygen consumption goes, and it has its own built-in safeguards. Now I'm going to run this thermostat down again. We'll take it down to, say, 46 and see if it cycles off. And there it is. It just cycled off. Alright, so that little bit of heat raised this temperature from 46 to 56, just being in front of it. And it just cycled off. Now, if you listen real close, I'll run it up again to 64. And there's the click. Now that's energizing the solenoid, opening the line, and allowing fuel gas to flow to the burner itself. And as you can see, it's starting to get a little bit orange. You can just barely make it out. But that's how I operate my propane heater on a thermostat. So when I stealth camp, I can have nice, comfortable temperatures. I am thinking about installing a 12-volt delay timer so I can program this thing to cycle on while I'm at work about a half hour before I actually get off work. So when I come out to my vehicle in the cold winter months, the vehicle's already warmed up in the interior. You know, so I don't have to sit and shiver and wait for the engine to start warming up to deliver heat. And sometimes I don't leave right away. Parking lot can be congested sometimes, and it takes a little while for it to empty. So I can sit there and idle, but I don't have to sit and shiver while I wait for it to idle. Okay, if you have any questions, comments, obviously you can ask a question via YouTube with the replies and whatnot, but go ahead and feel free. I'm going to cycle this down to the low setting. Alright, there it is. Still burning, right? Now it's on the low setting. That's usually what I run it on. And as you can see, the temperature here, just sitting in front of it, has jumped up to 62 because the heat's on. Now I take it down to 43 on the set point, and it's going to shut off. And there it is. Now it's shut off. It's not doing anything, not delivering any heat, but the pilot light is still on because I haven't interrupted that particular fuel source. Again, questions, comments, like, subscribe. I don't have a lot of videos on there, but I'm going to be doing more regarding my whole endeavor to save on hotel expenses while I travel for work. A lot of the people that I work with will spend anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 a month for lodging while they're traveling to work. So I wanted to make sure I took that money home with me. And for those of you living in a van full-time, this might change the way that you look at the cold weather months. Hey, thanks for watching.